Hello, Quinnipiac hockey fans, and welcome to the Neutral Zone. My name is MJ Baird. Alongside me today is Mike Dalton, Q30's women's ice hockey beat reporter. And Mike, the regular season is coming to an end, and the playoffs are starting. And for the women's team, they have their first playoff series of the weekend, this upcoming weekend. 8-hour long bus ride to North Country, New York to take on St. Lawrence. I mean, this is going to be quite the series. So what do you think? What are your not your predictions for this, but what do you think both teams need to do to win this matchup?
Well, MJ, this is going to be quite the ECAC hockey quarterfinals matchup between Quinnipiac and St. Lawrence. The Bobcats embarked on almost a 6-hour bus ride. I actually looked it up myself, to Canton, New York this morning, and they definitely want to have an enjoyable bus ride back. The Bobcats and Saints last played each other on February 9th, which the game ended in a 1-1 tie. Now, my biggest takeaway from that game was that both teams played phenomenal defense. The Bobcats and Saints did a great job shutting down each team's top goal scorers, and every time there was a power play, either for Quinnipiac or St. Lawrence, special teams responded by killing off the penalty despite being down a player. Overall, it was one of the most evenly matched games I have ever seen between two hockey teams. The only difference was that the Bobcats had so many more scoring opportunities in that game, especially towards the end. If the Bobcats are going to beat the Saints, they need to take advantage of as many scoring chances as possible. Grace Harrison and Shelly Songia don't let a lot of shots get by them. Plus, the Bobcats score a majority of their goals within a 5 to 10 foot radius of the net, so they're willing to get in those dirty areas. Plus, forwards like Brooke Bonsteel, Taylor House, and Randy Marcon can use their size to their advantage and just out-muscle smaller defenders like Amanda McClure and Lydia Grauer, so they can win those puck battles that take place right in front of the net.
Very good insight, Mike. Thank you. So, I mean, if you talked about the goals there, so I think it's just interesting if we look at this stat. Quinnipiac's goals this year, 63. That's less than 2 per game on average. St. Lawrence, 82. That's over 2.5 per game on average. And then you look at goals against, they both have 62. So, I mean, this is interesting. Both teams are going to give up similar amount of goals on paper. Of course, that's not, obviously going to happen. But St. Lawrence just scores more than Quinnipiac, and that's been the mantra for the Bobcats all season, as you kind of alluded to. They just don't really have that pure goal scorer with TT Cianfrano being injured for the whole year.
They have, and in fact, on Tuesday, Dylan Fearon and Josh Silverman were asked if they were concerned by Quinnipiac's lack of scoring, and both of them expressed their concerns, and I couldn't agree more with them, MJ. In order for the Saints to beat the Bobcats, they have to keep the puck away from Samo and Lancaster. They've carried the offensive load for the Bobcats all year. They're the playmakers for the Bobcats. On February 9th, Quinnipiac scored first against St. Lawrence, but they didn't score another goal for the rest of the game. The Bobcats played a great game defensively, but with the amount of scoring chances they had in the final minutes, the Bobcats should have capitalized on at least one of those opportunities. And in order to win games, you have to be able to score when it counts. But they only have a handful of players that are a consistent threat to score. What also affects the Bobcats going forward is goaltending. Abby Ives was in net last game for the Bobcats. Unfortunately, the next game against Clarkson, Ives got hurt and Allison Small was forced to step in. Small had only appeared in 6 games before getting the starting job, and even though Small lacks experience, she's played very well as of late. When she came into Clarkson, they were down a goal, and she was able to keep the team in the game and ended up only surrendering a single goal, which is pretty good considering Clarkson's the defending national champions. After that, Small only gave up a goal in a 4-1 win over Brown and 2 goals in a 2-0 loss to Yale. And that loss to Yale doesn't reflect on how well she played. The Bobcats' offense just couldn't get the job done.
Interesting facts to note there, Mike. And also, too, I think it's cool if we look at these stats. I mean, Quinnipiac has the least penalty minutes in the conference, and St. Lawrence has the best power play in the conference when you look at just conference games. So if the Bobcats aren't in the box that much, therefore St. Lawrence can't go on the power play that much, and therefore they can't use their potent goal scoring to their advantage. On the other hand, Quinnipiac's a middle-of-the-pack penalty kill percentage team, so really they need to stay out of the box because St. Lawrence has Kennedy Marchment as a top point getter in the ECAC in points per game on the power play. So that's just an impressive stat there for them. They can definitely make a difference if they have the man advantage, Mike. But okay, nonetheless, this game is this weekend, so give me your predictions.
So this weekend, I think Quinnipiac has played very well against ranked teams all year, and surprisingly, they have not played well against teams that aren't so good, like Yale and Brown. But I think this game is going to go I think it's going to go the distance. Okay. I think it's going to go all 3 games. However, I do think Quinnipiac is going to go short. They're going to, I think, St. Lawrence is going to win the first game. Quinnipiac is going to win the second game. And then third game, it's going to go to St. Lawrence. Once again, they're going to take the 2-1 the series, 2 games to 1. I do think that one of these games, I'm not saying which one, I do think one of them will go to overtime, considering that 1-1 tie that they had the last game they played each other. So these are two teams that are very evenly matched. They're very defensively minded teams, and they can go the distance. They can play 60 minutes. Obviously, the Bobcats, they are a team that's known to start off really well, and sometimes, you know, they do fizz out a little bit in the end, but they can still go toe-to-toe with top-ranked teams.
And I think it's interesting, too, you bring up the overtime thing. We're in the playoffs. These games don't end in ties.
Exactly.
They're going to go to double, triple overtime if they need to. And that's just another thing in terms of can the team keep up. Because they might play 5 periods of hockey just to find a winner. And if that's in the first or second game of the series, that could really affect that third game on Sunday afternoon when the teams are really fatigued. But let me ask you this, Mike. The goaltending situation, we have to kind of assume that it's going to be Allison Small who gets the start because Abby Ives did not play last weekend against Yale or against Brown. I watched Abby Ives. I was at the game against Yale. Very ginger out on the ice in warm-ups. She actually didn't even take any reps in the pregame shoot-around, warming up the goaltender. So she kind of just stood there, definitely skating gingerly. So, assuming Allison Small goes, what do you expect from her?
Well, honestly, I expect a good series from her. I think she's been, like I said, I think she's been playing very well as of late. And at first she was, you know, kind of inconsistent, but she's really starting to show that she can come in, she can step up, and she can take charge and, you know, give Ives a run for her money.
All right, Mike, well, thank you very much. The Bobcats have their first game tomorrow night, Friday, 3 p.m. up in St. Lawrence. We're going to take a quick break here on the Neutral Zone, but when we come back, I'll have Jonathan Banks on the desk to discuss Quinnipiac men's ice hockey. We'll be right back.
Hello, and tonight on Sandwich News, we will determine what makes a good sandwich and a bad sandwich. First, the standard sandwich. Uninspired, and frankly, a little gross. But we have here a Ray and Mike sandwich, the Cadillac of sandwiches. And if you want one, well,
come on down to Ray and Mike's at 3030 Whitney Ave, Hamden, Connecticut. Open every day from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. QCash is accepted.
now that's a sandwich.
Bobcat Breakdown presented by the Quinnipiac Bobcats Sports Network.
We are your source for debate.
Did they make the playoffs last year, Tom Jenkins?
When it clicks, it clicks.
We dissect Quinnipiac athletics on a scale you've never seen before.
With Tobia, it almost looks like she's reaching a little bit.
Plus, we bring in the biggest names surrounding college sports.
We are live here at the Times Union Center with Jay Billis.
And of course, some comedy.
But you can only have so much arena food.
I think you're crazy.
Bobcat Breakdown.
Tuesdays at 9:30.
Thanks for sticking with us here on the Neutral Zone. Now joining me is Jonathan Banks, Quinnipiac men's ice hockey beat reporter for Q30 Sports. Jonathan, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, MJ. Thanks for having me. I'm ready to talk some hockey.
No problem at all. So the Quinnipiac women's ice hockey team we just talked about with Mike is in the playoffs, but the men's team has one more weekend of regular season play. They'll be on the road, coincidentally, up in North Country as well, taking on St. Lawrence and Clarkson. And this series is really important because the Bobcats are going to find out, one, what seed they are in the postseason tournament, and two, are they going to be at home or traveling in that first round? So, first question for you, weekend preview, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I think Quinnipiac really has to come out of this winning both games. Let's start with St. Lawrence. They were on a 3-game losing streak, lost 5 of their last 6. They have 7 points on the year, and in that 3-game losing streak, they've been outscored 11-1. So as Kyle Levasseur, another men's ice hockey beat reporter, likes to say, it's a trap game of sorts for Quinnipiac. I think that they have to win this on Friday night, especially going to the fact that the third tiebreaker in the standings will be matchups against the top 4 in Colgate. The Colgate, another team up in New York, is going to play Union on Friday. So that will be huge for Quinnipiac to be able to win that game. And then they also face Clarkson on Saturday, which is another huge game in Clarkson. They tied Brown 2-2 at the end of January. And in the whole month of February, they haven't won.
Yeah,
I mean, Devin Brousseau cooled off. He has just 2 points in his last 7 games. Nico Sturm, the center of that sophomore premier line, he had 7 games with no goals. He did score twice in their last 5-2 loss to Harvard, but he has 2 goals there. Yeah, I mean, Kelly Summers has 4 points in his last 3 games, 20 assists for Clarkson. And it's going to be really important for Clarkson, for their mindset to be able to win, because their last game of the season is Quinnipiac. They will get a bye. But also they have to play for something, too. Harvard, if Harvard wins both of their games, then Harvard will jump them for 3rd. Clarkson will get the 4 seed after dominant first half of their 12-0 in the ECAC. But, I mean, it really all depends. I think Quinnipiac is going to go in there and beat Clarkson and beat St. Lawrence, so it all depends how the chips fall, whether or not the Bobcats will get a home playoff series.
Yeah, there's a log jam, if you will, in the middle of the ECAC
absolutely.
standings. It's interesting you bring up Harvard, too. Ryan Donato's coming back from the Olympics.
That's huge.
And he'll be back or you would assume he'd be back for Harvard this weekend. And then you said Clarkson, too. They have Princeton and Quinnipiac this weekend at home. 2 good games, but they're going to be tough. Like you said, Clarkson's struggling right now. They need to get back in the right frame of mind. So just a quick fun fact. You talk about Quinnipiac needing to win these 2 games. Well, the Bobcats right now are 2 games below 500.
Right.
And I think this is really interesting. Quinnipiac, 13, 15, and 4. Like I said, 2 games below 500. Quinnipiac hasn't finished below 500 as a team since its first year in Division I. That's the 1998-99 season. Also, Quinnipiac hasn't traveled in the first round of the ECAC tournament since its first season in the conference, 05-06. So there's 4 big points on the line this weekend. I think it's more than just where they're playing. It's that pride that Quinnipiac is a team that's not a bottom feeder in the ECAC. We'll move on to the next question, though. Who needs to step up this weekend for the Bobcats?
I mean, we can talk about how they have 3 goal scorers that are in double digits. We got Tanner McMaster, Alex Whalen, and Bo Pieper. 11 for Pieper, 14 for Whalen, and 12 for McMaster. But I'm looking at Matt Forchuk, and Matt Forchuk has just 2 goals and 6 assists in 25 games this year. But he's a prolific goal scorer that this team needs now. He's had struggles developing and coming into his first year in college hockey. But with the Canmore Eagles in the BCHL, he had 32 goals and 65 assists last year. He led the league in points. This kid knows how to put the puck in the back of the net. And he scored against Cornell on November 3rd, I believe that was the date of that game. He scored that game, hasn't really scored. He scored against Union on Friday, but other than that, only has 2 goals. But he's an elite thinker. He knows how to get in the right scoring positions, but it all depends on if he's going to get it off, so he can do it in the Alberta Junior Hockey League. And Rand Pecknold said that he's seen flashes of his brilliance in practice, so he said that after the St. Lawrence game. He said it again after the Union game, so it's really up to Forchuk. I mean, he's had the whole season to prepare. Now, with basically other teams knowing that Quinnipiac has 3 viable scoring threats, it's going to be up to Forchuk to put the puck in the back of the net this weekend and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, Forchuk's kind of one of those freshmen who's worked his way into the lineup through hard work, through success on the ice in practice. And I mean, it's got to come eventually. You got to think for the freshman. And I would say Forchuk definitely a good player to focus this weekend. For me personally, I'm going to say Alex Whalen. This kid just always seems to thrive in the high pressure situations. In this last regular season series and as well as in the playoffs, I can just see Whalen being the guy who's going to kind of spark this team. He has glaring speed. He can come all the way up and down the guy's beat any defender, and he has an amazing shot as well. So I would look forward to him.
Question about Whalen, quickly. Does it worry you that he's a very streaky goal scorer? He's gone through 4 games this season where he hasn't scored a goal. Beginning of the season, started scoring 4 in his last 5, and every once in a while, it just seems to not find the back of the net.
Yeah, he is definitely streaky, but I think back to last year up at St. Lawrence on the road in the playoffs. This kid, I think it was 2 goals in 3 minutes in one game, and he had scored the game winner the night before
Just a
to
game
propel the
changer.
team. Exactly, a game changer. All right, we'll move on to our last topic for men's ice hockey today. Potential first-round matchups for the Bobcats. Like I said, there's a log jam. It could be a lot of teams, but what do you think?
MJ, this was a doozy, but while Mike Dalton was here, I was trying to figure out all the tiebreakers, and it was just crazy. So basically, depending on the results, Quinnipiac can finish anywhere from 5th place to 9th place. So it all depends on what all these other teams do. I mean, Yale plays Dartmouth and Harvard this week, and that's a huge one. I think Yale's going to lose both. So Yale's going to be stuck on 19 points. Quinnipiac, I think, will win both Clarkson and St. Lawrence this weekend, so that'll propel them to 22 points. Princeton, who's in that logjam also, they play Clarkson and St. Lawrence. They have the reverse schedule of Quinnipiac on opposite days. I think Princeton's been playing well lately, even though they just lost, but I think they're going to win both of those games. I think Colgate's going to split with Union and RPI this weekend, and Dartmouth, who has to play Yale and Brown, I think they're going to beat both of them. So just to summarize that fact, Dartmouth will be 5th with 25, Princeton 6th with 23. Colgate and Quinnipiac are tied in 7th and 8th with 22, and ninth place is Yale with 19 points. And this is where it gets all types of crazy. The first tiebreaker is head-to-head matchup. That would be Colgate and Quinnipiac. On my guess, they'll be tied with 22. On November 4th, Colgate came to Hampden and won 4-1. Colton Point didn't play in the last game. Quinnipiac won 4-3. Second tiebreaker would be the wins. They would both end up with 10 based on my prediction. Third tiebreaker, results against the top 4. Colgate has 5 right now, and they play Union on Friday, so that's huge. Quinnipiac has 3. They play Clarkson, so that's also huge. So there are just a ton of other tiebreakers to take into account. It's just crazy.
Yeah, you're going to come down to the 3rd and 4th tiebreaker, and then who knows from there. Well, that's all the time we have this week on the Neutral Zone. Thank you so much for tuning in. You can check out all our content on our website at q30tv.com, and of course, follow us on social media at Q30 Sports. For Jonathan Banks and Mike Dalton, my name's MJ Baird. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.